My name is STACEY STEERS, and I'm here today to do a short tutorial for those of you who are interested in 2D and 3D stop motion animation. I hope that you're well. I know that many of you are at home, and it seems like it might be a good opportunity to try out a few elementary aspects of animation, things you can easily do at home, pretty much anywhere in your house. So as I mentioned, I am an artist. I normally work in multidisciplinary forms, but one of the main focuses of my practice is animation, and that's what I'll be talking about today. I had the great honor of being invited to exhibit my last project called Edge of Alchemy, which was in the museum beginning in September of last year until the museum was forced to close in March of this year because of the pandemic. That exhibition was called Edge of Alchemy, and I hope that perhaps some of you had an opportunity to see it. During the course of the exhibition, we did a workshop one Saturday where we showed very basic approaches to doing animation, and that's what I'm going to try and cover again today for those of you who weren't able to be there or perhaps just want a refresher on some of the things to think about when you decide to try animation. I am going to just talk for 1 second about the work I do. You can see images from my work over here on the wall. This work is more complex than the kind of thing that I'm going to be trying to teach you to do today. My work is based on collages, and I make many collages for each of my films because I'm literally constructing 8 collages for each second of screen time. You can see that my collages have characters. The woman who's currently on the wall is Lillian Gish, and I'm cutting her from sequences of her early work, which she did in the 1920s, silent era films, and actually I'm going to be using some films where she's actually aging, which she did in front of the camera. She had a very long career in cinema. So my animation is actually very similar to 2D collage animation. The only difference being that I create a lot of collages under the camera rather than moving the elements of paper, which is the way it's usually done. So today we're going to be talking more about this simpler technique of moving elements under the paper to create animation. You can see over here that there's a lot of materials. This is my studio, which is really more of an office. With animation, you're actually not that interested in having a lot of ambient light. In fact, we had to open a lot of the windows to prepare for this so you could actually see me. But we want to control light in animation because too much of it can be disruptive and it will shift, and then suddenly your animation doesn't seem consistent. But for this purposes of working at home, there's probably not a lot of reason to worry about it. As long as you like the lighting setup you're using, you'll be fine. So for the kind of work that I do, I start with a lot of paper elements. You can see here I use X-Acto knives, I have a ruler, I have scissors, which are important because you can cut things out from many sources like magazines or photographs, postcards, wrapping paper, anything at all. In my own work, I use colored pencils. My images tend to come from old books that are copyright-free image sources. These are called clip art books. This is a beautiful one by images from Ernst Haeckel, who was a 19th century artist who did a lot of images of the natural world. But there are tons of these different books, which I've collected across the years. Now, all of these images are pretty much available online, and we're going to be posting a source of online websites where you can go and find a huge array of images if you don't like all of the ones that you have in your sources at home. And then this is an animation setup that I use to do the first pass-through of my collage work. This is where I'm actually creating the collages. This is a low-resolution camera later on, after I create all of the collages, I'll move to something that gives me a much higher resolution image. But for the purposes of construction, I'm just working on a flat surface with the camera up above and my computer over here running a program called Dragon Frame. That's a professional level program, but I actually constructed the film that was at MCA this fall using a consumer grade product called iStop Motion, which is available in a free form on the internet. The program we're suggesting people use today actually is even simpler than that one. It's called iMotion, and it's available on your iPad or even your iPhone. There's probably an Android version too. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm almost sure. And that one allows you to shoot very simple stop motion animation extremely simply, and there's going to be a tutorial. There's a tutorial on the same place you went to find this video that will show you how to use iMotion, and it is very, very simple. We could take a quick look over here at some of my finished collages just to sort of give you a sense of what I'm doing and how it relates to what I'm going to be showing you today quickly, part of what I'm going to be showing you. So this is a scene from a new project I'm working on. It's got a moth, this big green moth. There's an open door here. It may be, I'm trying to get back to where you can see. There's the door. The door is opening, and behind the door, there's actually an image of the Earth that's starting to move away. So my new film takes place in outer space, and this scene gives you this sense that the door is open, and you can see the Earth regressing retreating into the background, and a big moth shows up and is in the doorway. And this is called replacement animation, which is one of the very easy techniques of 2D animation, where I'm literally just using different moth cutouts, one after the other, but it gives the impression that there's a moth fluttering away here in the doorway when you show these at 24 frames per second, which is the rate I shoot at. The most important thing to remember when you're shooting animation is that the things that you don't want to move have to be secured. This varies. There's some people who really like a lot of motion. They don't care if it's super jittery. But if you don't want things to move, you need to secure them. So if you're using a paper background, I suggest that you tape it in place. The camera is the other extremely critical aspect of this. Your iPad or your iPhone need to be placed somehow so that they won't move. Now, if you don't have a tripod for your iPad, for your iPad or your iPhone, there's a lot of ways to get around that. You can set up some books to keep it in place. You just use your imagination. You can tape it. You can have someone else hold it, although that typically doesn't work for a long time. A lot of iPads have their own covers that can be worked to help us make them stationary in place. And so you'll just have to align your camera with the surface, whatever surface you're using. I'm shooting directly over the paper, but that wouldn't necessarily have to be the case. You could have your iPad or phone out here just tilted down, and you could still pretty much accomplish the same thing. So the registration is important. The materials, as I said, can be just about anything you want to use. And right now we're talking about 2D animation, but 3D animation opens up a whole other world of possibilities, and I'll be mentioning that in just a little while. But for the 2D work, you just want to cut things out of magazines, photographs, postcards, books, anything that you can copy, you can use, or destroy. If you don't mind cutting into it, you can use those things as well. So for this tiny little segment, I actually created a very short segment of animation that's a bee who is on a flower. And if you did see my last film, you know that one of the topics of the film is actually hive collapse. So I used a lot of bees, and I figured out quite a bit about how to animate them, mostly using what's called, again, replacement animation. So in the same way I was replacing this image of the moth in order to give a sense of a moth moving in space, In my film, I'm using different images of bees, which I cut out of various clip art sources and just used one after the other in a whole bunch of collages. So I wanted to show you just this little tiny example of what I did. So just looking at the surface of the animation stand that we have here, just to tell you what some of these things are that I'm honestly not using currently, but these are animation pegs. And this is the paper that would go on the pegs. And so when I create my collages, I do it on this paper. And that way, when I always know that the collage is positioned with relationship to the ones that come before and after in the right way. But for our purposes, I just use tape. So I've got my background. I just had a piece of blue paper around, which I put down here. I cut out an image of a flower, which I glued in place. So those particular things are stationary. Everything else can move. And even though I did glue him down at the end, but I won't use him right now. So this guy is going to stay here only because when I show you the little shot that I made, I wanted it to end and for him to be visible in stationary. So anyway, this was all done using these basic images of a bee, 4 different images of a bee that you see here, replacing one after the other, moving a small distance. Now, timing is something that is obviously very critical in animation. The way that we adjust timing is by how far we move an object in between shots of it. The less we move the object, the slower our animation will go. The faster we move the object, the faster our animation will go. That's obvious. In my case, I actually shoot 3 shots of each position, and I think that will probably work very well for your purposes as well. It actually, the industry standard for someone like Walt Disney would be 2 shots, but 3 shots still gives a great deal of fluidity. And that way you're basically creating 8 different positions for each second of screen time when things are moving at 24 frames per second. iMotion actually has a nice tool in that it allows you to change the speed of the film, so you can slow your animation down and speed it up and see what the difference that makes. Obviously, as you speed it up, things will start to move faster. But in general, the problem is that people, when they first begin to make animation, think things are going to look as if they're there longer than they are. So typically, when people first start to make animation, they move things too far. So just to keep that in mind as you go forward. But with replacement animation, literally all you do is take out one image, one of your little images, and put in another one. In my case, they're all bees, but these could be anything. These could be, images of anything at all. And sometimes the fact that they're different is actually what makes them interesting. For an insect in particular, the fact that these are changing makes it feel more insect-like. We could be working abstractly. You could be using design elements, cut out stars, changing color. Your background could change color if you wanted it to. You just have to work to line it up again when you started going back to work. There's just a million things that you can do in animation to create variety and interest and have fun, which is, I think, the main point of all of this. You should feel open to explore. You should not worry about making mistakes. And you should realize that sometimes mistakes lead you to great discoveries. That's a really important thing. So we're just going to look at this little sequence that I made. Again, just replacing that bee and creating the sense that he's actually, a moving insect. I had him pause at one moment just because I thought it would look a little more really bee-like. But there he is moving on his way to the top of the leaf. So that's just a very simple example of how this can be done. And again, I hope you'll feel free to explore your own approaches to doing this and finding all kinds of crazy materials to work with. You don't have to work on a flat surface. You could be doing this on a table with having little objects move between 3D elements. There's just a million ways to make animation, and the fun part is seeing what they all look like. So here you're seeing the image on my Macintosh computer. This image is actually what the camera is seeing. So as you see, when I put my hand in there, the camera is now seeing my hand. Take my hand away, it's seeing the image. If we go back in my program, these are images that don't involve the camera. You can't see my hand. My hand is under the camera because they've been shot. And so what's happening here is it's allowing me to look at the image I just shot and the one I'm about to shoot. And this is something you can do in iMotion as well. It's basically toggling between the new image and the old image, which is what's helping me to place the insect in the right position in order to get a sense of fluidity when I actually finish the shot. So we're going to use a little toggling here just to show you a bit about how this works. So this little bee is over here now, you can see. Now if I take a shot, there it is. Then I have a new bee, and he's toggling in between. And I can see that coming. I can decide exactly the position I want to put him in. And then I can take a shot of that. Except for he's not quite right. Yep. So this kind of animation is done without glue, which is the big difference between the way I work and the way I suggest you work. You're moving all the elements of paper under the camera. You have to be careful that you're because you have the registration tools, you can keep track, but it is very easy for things to slide, so don't sneeze in the middle of a shot. But this is basically how this kind of animation is made, and it's terrific. We have the tools we do. When I learned, we didn't. So here, we'll just watch this, and there he comes into the screen. Now we're going to talk briefly about 3D animation. Before we go on to that, I do want to say, so I don't forget to tell you, that there is a handout that you can print, also available on the website, that describes some of the things I've been talking about and goes into a little more detail about some of the possible choices you might want to see, ask yourself about making. And be sure and look for all the resources there. I think we'll also have a selection of some films that you can go to that are online, that just to give you some ideas of the many various ways that people work with animation. All right, so moving on to 3D animation, actually the same principles apply. You can easily make 3D animation using, say, a bunch of beans that you might move around a colored surface. Geometric designs of all kinds are possible using all kinds of things that you just find around your house and in your kitchen. And again, there's a list of stuff that I just thought of sitting there this morning, thinking about the many ways that you could use objects that are in your house, parts from games, things like dominoes, playing cards, all that kind of thing can be used to make really creative and fun animation. This is just an example of a very simple armature that I made using aluminum foil. So an armature is basically a puppet that you use for 3D animation. And in this case, as you can see, it's some sort of a four-legged animal, but it's just made from literally 3 pieces of aluminum foil. It took me about 60 seconds to make him. And the great thing about aluminum foil is that it's actually pliable, and it's resilient. So I can, move his legs, and they tend to kind of keep their position. Let's say, I don't even know what kind of animal this is, but you can move the legs, and again, you'd be using your program to help you register his position, but you can also keep him in place by using things like little push pins. These are kind of big push pins, and something, either cardboard or foam core, that you can push into underneath. And that way it just secures him, so you don't have to worry between shots. It makes it a little bit easier to make him, say, walk, or whatever you want to do with him. The other thing that's really fun to work with in terms of 3D animation is people. People can be animated. You can get your friends to try to hold positions and then move, and you can shoot one position after the other. You can literally watch your mom cook in the kitchen and just take shot after shot after shot, and you're going to end up, or your partner, you're going to end up with an animated film. There's just so many ways to approach 3D object animation, all of which can be really fun. You need something probably for a background or not. You should be aware of your light. Be sure you check before you start shooting, because that's something we've even had to think about in this little bit of filming we're doing, because your lighting is really going to impact the way things look, but you can see them as you're working, which is a great asset of the immediate playback capability of digital. I think that I've covered most of the topics. Again, substitution is a great way to go about doing 3D animation, just like it is for 2D, but it's by no means the only thing. So I hope you'll look around for the materials you have in your house and figure out ways that you can enjoy exploring this wonderful technique. The beauty of animation is always that the things that we are creating and taking shots of aren't in the long run the thing we're looking at, because the magic occurs in between the shots, and it's persistence of vision that gives us the magic of animation. So thank you again for listening to me. Again, there's resources online. I'm happy to be available if anyone has additional questions. And again, stay well and have fun. Thank you.